Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome to my review of Evil Dead.
Rise from your grave.
Now, this was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the entire year. If you know me, you know I love some horror, and I love me some Sam Raimi. Growing up as a horror fan, that original Evil Dead trilogy, that's probably as important to shaping my taste in movies as some of my favorite trilogies of all time, including the original Star Wars.
What the hell did you just say?
You don't mean that.
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
So how does Evil Dead compare to that original trilogy and the 2013 Fede Alvarez remake? Let's talk about it. But before I get into my thoughts on the movie, please be sure to share your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of it. Did it live up to expectations? Did it exceed expectations? Or was it a bit of a letdown? And with all that being said, let's get into it.
Mom?
Mommy's with the maggots now.
A decade ago, Fede Alvarez got a chance to leave his directorial mark on this franchise with the 2013 remake. A decade later, we get Lee Cronin making Evil Dead Rise. And the first thing we have to talk about, because it's a pretty big departure for this franchise, instead of an isolated cabin in the woods, this movie actually takes place in an apartment complex in Los Angeles. And I would say I was skeptical, to say the very least, because I mean, come on, this is the Evil Dead. Cabin in the woods, that's what they do.
They're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid.
And after watching the movie, I think for the most part they pulled it off. I think they were able to capture that feeling of dread and isolation somehow, even with them being in like this big apartment complex. There's not a ton of characters in play here, which helps with the whole isolation thing. Another first in this franchise, this movie chooses to focus on family, where it's a mother and her 3 kids that are about to be evicted from their home, as opposed to just like a random group of friends, like you see in most typical slasher films.
You're pathetically predictable.
And as far as the whole family element goes, I like what they were doing on paper. I think it's a great concept to introduce to this universe, where not even kids are safe. That definitely adds to the tension and the dread, where you don't want to see anything happen to these underage kids. But at the same time, this is probably the movie in the franchise where I'm gonna complain about characters and character development. And listen, I know what you're saying. It's Evil Dead, right? Why are we talking about character development if their name's not Ash? And normally I agree with you. Most horror or slasher movies, I don't give a shit about character development, but this is on the movie. When you introduce the family aspect, the family element, these are people that you want to connect with more than just like random drunk teenagers in the woods.
I'm wasted.
So when you introduce the family element, you gotta really make me care about these characters. And to be honest, unfortunately, I really didn't. And you know, they do try to give them personality traits and character quirks. You have the oldest, the son, who is into DJing and really likes music. You have the middle daughter who wants to go to a protest the next day. She's really about, you know, social justice and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the little girl who's just adorable. But I don't know if it was just a lack of character development before we kind of get into the madness, or maybe I just personally didn't click with these characters. But yeah, I wanted to care about the child characters more than I did. And don't get me wrong, I'm not heartless. That doesn't mean I want to see these children get murdered, but I wanted to care about them more than I did, so if and when bad things happen to them, it would have been a little more impactful.
First of all, that's horrible.
But while I didn't necessarily connect with the children in the movie, the standout performance that everybody's talking about was Alyssa Sutherland as Ellie, the mother. She was equally good as the mom, and then on the back end as the Deadite. Possibly the best Deadite performance in the series. She said she took a lot of inspiration from Jim Carrey in The Mask. And when you know that fun little fact, it shows through pretty well. Now, staying on the positive thoughts train here, this movie does deliver everything you're hoping for as an Evil Dead fan, as far as the blood, the guts, the gore. That's all great. I think this movie chose to focus a little more on the comedy, where 2013 was taking itself 100% seriously. This movie is still about 90% horror. They fit a little dark comedy in here that works at certain moments.
You don't look so good, Mom.
Nothing a big old kiss from you won't fix.
From a technical standpoint, everything about the movie is top-notch. this is a fucking awesome looking and sounding horror movie. I think the most underrated aspect of a great horror movie is great sound design. This is probably the loudest movie I've ever watched. I mean that in a good way. If you saw this movie in the theater, please back me up down in the comments below and let me know how fucking loud this movie was. And on top of the sound design, the movie is just beautifully shot. The set pieces, the cinematography help add to the tension and isolation of the apartment. There is a ton of tribute and homage paid to Sam Raimi in this movie. Like, there are certain parts where you're like, are you sure Sam Raimi had nothing to do with directing this? And to me, the most visually interesting scene in the movie, you saw in parts in the trailer, and that's everything through the people, like through that fisheye lens. To me, this is where the movie was most creative. Even though it's horrific, I'm laughing my ass off. Because obviously, you know how people works. At a certain point, it's gonna cut off. You can only see so far right, so far left. So during one sequence, you just see the mother Deadite literally running back and forth down this hall, throwing people. You see a shotgun blast her halfway across the fucking hall. It's awesome. That entire sequence, super creative, super fun. And while I don't think this is as violent or gory as the Fede Alvarez 2013 remake, there is still a lot of gore to be had here. I think that movie focused more on the gore, and this movie was more of kind of the gross out side of horror with that little bit of dark humor. As far as mixed aspects, I already talked about some of the characters that didn't necessarily work for me. Didn't connect with the kids as well as I would have liked to. Loved the mother and the Deadite, Ellie. And then you have Aunt Beth, who is kind of our protagonist. And I liked her enough. I liked the movie's kind of message about rising to the occasion of motherhood. You know, that was cool. And do I like her as much as Ash? No, but I mean, I don't like anybody as much as Ash.
Groovy.
Do I like her as much as Mia from 2013? No, I kind of found Mia's character arc more entertaining. But who knows, there are 3 books of the dead, so maybe they introduce Beth, Mia, and Ash? That'd be pretty dope. And then as far as negatives go, this first one isn't the movie's fault per se, but God, I really need to stop watching trailers, especially for horror movies.
You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!
But did Blumhouse make this? Because this is another trailer that gives up almost every big moment of the movie. Like, it showed the glass in the neck, it showed the cheese grater, it showed the ripping off of the pigtail, and then it showed the some of the sequences through the peephole. To me, the first half of the movie was stronger than the second half, and this entire trailer was just the best moments of the first half of the movie. Horror movies, get better with your trailers. Look at Barbarian. That's how you do that shit. There are some questionable character choices here that I'm not going to dive too far into because we're talking about horror. So I know it's a trope of horror is that you just have some dumbass character choices. But really, when you have like a possessed demon outside of your door and 3 young children, why are you going off into a side room and putting headphones on to listen to something?
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
Next up on my negative list is something I was actually worried about going in, and to an extent, it came true. And that is with this change of setting, with this new family dynamic, there's just something about this movie that doesn't quite feel Evil Dead to me. At a lot of times, it felt like a typical post-2000s possession movie, which, by the way, not a fan. And then my final negative is I wasn't a huge fan of like this freaking Megazord blob thing we got at the end of the movie. I think in terms of scare factor and just their execution, I think the Deadites were more effective in the movie than this goddamn blob monster. There was just something about that I didn't like.
He stinks and I don't like him.
It was great to see the boomstick back, it was great to see the chainsaw back, but the goddamn wood chipper. Did you guys learn nothing from Halloween Ends? The longer this year goes, the more it becomes painfully evident that 2022 spoiled us horror fans. So any year that hasn't been great for horror, overall I had a pretty good time with Evil Dead Rise.
Good, not great.
If I plug it into the Evil Dead franchise, it would probably be near the bottom or at the bottom of that list. But like I said, 5 movies, there's not a bad one in the bunch, so that's not meant to be a diss. If I'm just going in as a fan of horror and not knowing anything about the Evil Dead, it's an effective horror movie. It's scary, it's gross, it creeps you out, there's tension, it makes you laugh uncomfortably at certain points. There will be things that maybe you're not comfortable seeing, but it was still a great time, and I would recommend it to any Evil Dead fan. So I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. But that's gonna do it for my review of Evil Dead Rise. Let me know down in the comments below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or was it just okay? And let me know where you would place this within your Evil Dead franchise ranking. While I have you, me and 3 friends do a weekly pop culture podcast called Culture Shocked. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts, and I will put a link down in the description below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, hell, even if you hated this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing right over here so you don't miss any future content, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.